Good day, Crime Talk aficionados. This is Scott Reisch of Crime Talk. Today on the docket, Timothy Jones receives his verdict. An update in the Patrick Frazee case says, test the tooth. And let's talk about the Netflix documentary, When They See Us. Let's talk about it. Good day, Crime Talk aficionados. This is Scott Reisch of Crime Talk. Thank you for watching. If you like the channel, please subscribe. If you like the video, hit the like button, and always leave a comment. So, the first thing on the docket today, Tim Jones, the man accused of killing his 5 children in South Carolina, was on trial. He was found guilty of killing all 5 children. The jury rejected his plea of not guilty by reason of insanity. The penalty phase then took place, and the jury has decided that the only appropriate sentence is death. Obviously, there'll be years and years of appeals on this particular case, but it is a type of case where someone has murdered their own children, not just one, but his 5 children. The jury rejected his claims that he was mentally insane, and now he'll get the ultimate punishment. An update on the Patrick Frazee case. There was a hearing on Friday. The prosecution was asking the court to go forward with consumptive testing of tooth fragments found on the property. Okay? What does this mean, consumptive testing? Normally, if there's any physical evidence, the district attorney has to notify the defense and the court if there's going to be consumptive testing. Consumptive testing is simply testing that will destroy or will not allow for independent testing by the defense. Normally, they try to save enough so the defense can independently conduct their own testing and have their experts do the work. The court is allowing the testing to go forward in this particular case to see if the tooth is in fact that of Kelsey Barrett. There won't be anything for the defense to independently test. The court has allowed the defense experts to be present during the testing and presumably the analysis of any of the results that come forward from that testing. This could be a watershed moment in this case. Obviously, the police believe that Kelsey Barrett is deceased, but they are still looking for evidence of that. As we've talked about, it is very difficult to go forward on a homicide case alleging someone is deceased when you don't have a body. In the Patrick Frazee matter, the prosecution has the co-defendant, co-conspirator, accomplice after the fact, Crystal Lee Kenny, the girlfriend of Patrick Frazee, who drove from Idaho and was allegedly asked to kill Ms. Barrett multiple times by Mr. Frazee, didn't do it, but then drove from Idaho to pick up the crime scene, clean up the crime scene, but left little items because she said she was scared. The police in this particular case had scoured a landfill looking for some evidence of remains of Miss Barrett. Nothing was found to date. The fragments of the tooth found on the property could be significant. It could be a watershed moment to see if in fact these fragments corroborate the story of Crystal Lee Kenny. And the next matter on the docket today is the Netflix documentary of When They See Us. For those of you who have not seen the documentary, I encourage you to do so. I think it was actually very well done. Do I think it was a little biased in some respects? Yes. But do I think overall it catches the flavor of the proceedings that took place? Yes. For those who are probably too young to recall this case made national headlines for a very long time because there was the beating and sexual assault of a jogger in Central Park on April 19th of 1989. Ultimately, the police arrested and prosecuted 5 young men. Only one was 16 years old at the time of the alleged offense, and he was tried as an adult. Yusuf Salam, Antron McCrae, and Raymond Santana were each tried in their first trial, and they were in fact found guilty. In the second trial, Kevin Richardson and Corey Wise were tried and also found guilty. What makes this story so interesting is the fact that many of them were interrogated without parents, and they all confessed, except Yusuf Salam, to beating and sexually assaulting this woman, or being involved as a complicit in assisting in the sexual assault and beating of the Central Park jogger. And when you see the interrogation techniques that were used, it is not surprising that the police were able to obtain a conviction. Now, the district attorney who was supervising the sex crimes unit at this particular case was not portrayed in a very good light. Linda Fairstein, who is now a crime novelist, was portrayed as basically an overzealous prosecutor, and perhaps even portrayed as being somewhat prejudiced or racist towards these young black men. Now, the reality of it is that the boys did in fact confess. They all later recanted their testimony, saying that they were coerced, that they were held without food, they were not given legal counsel, and the confessions ultimately came in at court. What's really intriguing about this particular case is the lack of physical evidence. There was no identification of anyone who was charged in that particular case as it related to the beating of the Central Park jogger. There was no physical evidence tying anyone to the beating and sexual assault of the Central Park jogger. They really had, the district attorney had the conflicting statements by the individual boys saying that other boys had done certain things and that they had watched or assisted in some way. But as we've talked about previously, if one aids, encourages, or abets somebody in the commission of an offense, then they can be found guilty just like they had done it themselves. That's really what the prosecution was banking upon. Now, throughout the mini-series on Netflix, the district attorney, the police, and ultimately the DA who prosecuted the case became aware that their timeline did not make sense, and it would be impossible for these boys to be at the crime scene when they say they did. Basically, that was ignored and said, why should we let the facts get in the way of a good prosecution? As stated earlier, I remember this case. I was in college at the time. It was everywhere. Everybody was talking about getting a conviction. They had to get these boys. They had to get somebody to pay for this particular case. And this is a classic example of somebody being prosecuted because somebody had to pay. Our justice system, however, is based upon the fundamental principle that you only prosecute the person who's actually responsible for it. Every one of these boys went to juvenile detention of between 5 to 10 years, except for Mr. Wise in this particular case. Since he was 16, he went to adult prison and served some 14 years in prison. And the series makes it look like he did not have a good time based upon his high-profile status, his status as a rapist, and his youth. He spent a lot of time in solitary confinement, but he never gave up on his claim for innocence as all of the men did. This case shows how the system was treated and how that when they got out of prison, they had to register as sex offenders, how they were treated by family, friends, trying to obtain jobs. In 2001, a convicted serial rapist and murderer, Mateus Reyes, came forward claiming that he had in fact acted alone and was involved in the beating and sexual assault of the Central Park rapist. The district attorney obviously could not ignore this information. They tested the DNA, and guess what? It all came back to Mr. Mateus. Ultimately, the district attorney in New York asked that these 5 young men's convictions be vacated and basically be exonerated as a result of Mateus Reyes' confession to this case. The DNA evidence was a deciding factor because it actually placed him at the scene, which there was no other physical evidence placing anyone else at the scene. Where it gets interesting is that there's an investigation done after these proceedings and exonerations, and the city of New York stands by the convictions and says it's possible that Mateus acted in concert with the Gang of Five and that therefore everything should be fine. Ultimately, however, the city of New York gets sued by these gentlemen, asking for some $250 million, and the city settles the lawsuit for $41 million. $41 million is a lot of money to pay to somebody if you did everything by the book, if you did everything correctly. Obviously, mistakes were made. The city of New York, the prosecutors in that case will always claim nothing was done inappropriately. The courts found that their statements were fine or weren't challenged the admissibility of those statements. The reality of it is you have young men who are forced, pressured, coerced into confessing. There's no physical evidence. None of the statements that they made as it related to actually the place of the assault and descriptions of anything was accurate in any way. It's obvious, and obviously the city settled for $41 million. Nobody pays $41 million just to go away. That's a little more than nuisance money value in a civil case. The DA in this particular case, Linda Fairstein, she's the district attorney who is the head of the sex assault unit. She went on to become a crime novelist, and she is feeling the ramifications of this Netflix documentary. She has had to resign from nonprofits. Her agent has dropped her because of the portrayal in this miniseries. She wrote a piece in the Wall Street Journal defending her actions, for lack of a better term, nitpicking, saying, well, I wasn't there that night. I was there 22 hours later. Well, really? Is that the best you have? She's the one that coordinated. She told everyone to go forward. As recently as yesterday, the prosecutor, Elizabeth Lederer, who went forward with the trial, obtained the convictions, is not going to be reprimanded, but she was forced to resign her position as a professor at Columbia Law School. Real irony of this particular case is that the true perpetrator of this crime, Mateus Reyes, was never actually prosecuted for the Central Park jogger that there's no doubt that he committed, based upon his own confession and the corroboration of the DNA evidence, as well as facts that were not known to anyone else at the time. The reason he was never prosecuted was the statute of limitations had run prior to him coming forward and confessing. You all have to be the judge whether justice was done. Were these men involved? Like I said, the case was, all the charges were dismissed and they were exonerated, and the city paid $41 million to settle their claims. I would tend to lean toward the side that errors were made, people stepped across the line, and innocent men were wrongfully charged, convicted, and sent to prison for a crime they did not commit. That's all we have for Crime Talk today. I hope you enjoyed it. If you like the channel, please subscribe. Hit that little bell notification so you get notices of new content that we put out, as well as when we go live. If you like the video, please hit the like button, and please leave a comment. Let me know what you think about the new consumptive testing in Frazee, the verdict in the Jones case, as well as the Netflix documentary When They See Us. Have a great day.